Look at them, I killed them! Look! Blew it up! Oh man, they died at the, all of them!
What are you doing? Didn't you
record
record it?
I recorded it! Look!
No, I didn't believe you. All of them
All
from the
those from the
died.
Mexico is facing one of the greatest tragedies of the 21st century. A mass extermination site has been discovered at the Izaguirre Ranch in the Teuchitlan region, something that has shocked the entire country. If you're from Mexico, chances are you've already heard the horrifying details. The discovery brings chilling memories of Europe's darkest times when Nazi Germany operated extermination camps. At this ranch, several ovens were found, used to incinerate the bodies and belongings of missing people. But here's the true tragedy. This isn't the first time the ranch was inspected. Just last year, both the Mexican National Guard and the Army visited the site and claimed they found nothing. So how is it that only now an entire extermination camp has come to light, one eerily similar to those from Nazi-era Germany? The truth is, it wasn't the government that uncovered this atrocity. It was a group of volunteer women known as Madres Buscadoras, searching for their missing loved ones. This scandal has rocked the new administration of President Claudia Sheinbaum. And what's been the government's response so far? That there's still no official investigation confirming that people were actually killed there. So the questions I'm exploring in today's video are, how did Mexican cartels gain so much impunity? How deep does their influence go? And what should the Mexican government actually do to stop them? Let's dive in. The Izaguirre Ranch is believed to have been controlled by the Jalisco cartel, but make no mistake, this is just one of over 200 cartels operating in Mexico today. The most infamous include the Juarez Cartel, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, the Gulf Cartel, the Sinaloa Cartel, and the Michoacan Cartel. Honestly, it's like a multi-season crime series, except it's terrifyingly real. These cartels form and dissolve alliances constantly, fighting daily for territory. Some even splinter into new cartels, constantly reshaping Mexico's violent landscape. And here's the kicker. Many cartel members are former police or military officers who found crime more profitable than law enforcement. So the question is, how did it get this bad? How have the cartels grown so powerful that they can establish extermination sites under the government's nose? Let's go back in time. The cartels of the 1930s. Mexican cartels trace back to the 1930s when Juan Nepomuceno Guerra started smuggling alcohol into the U.S. during Prohibition. That operation became the Gulf Cartel, one of the oldest criminal syndicates in the Americas. But it wasn't until the 1980s that cartels grew into the criminal empires we see today. What changed? Cocaine. With massive shipments arriving from Colombia, Mexico became the key corridor into the U.S. To give you an idea of their scale, recent estimates suggest Mexican cartels now employ more than 175,000 people. But how many of them are on the cartel's actual payroll? To put things into perspective, the Mexican military has just over 275,000 active duty soldiers. Now, compare that to the estimated 175,000 cartel members. And here's the terrifying part. Cartels are better equipped. Unlike regular soldiers, cartel hitmen are armed with the best gear money can buy. We're talking heavy machine guns, assault rifles, sniper systems, even rocket launchers. They've got access to modern weaponry that would rival many national armies. But it doesn't stop there. These cartels have also built their own armored vehicles, straight out of a Mad Max movie. DIY tanks that roam the streets in certain regions, completely uncontested. Their firepower is so intense that, in some areas, the Mexican army has been forced to pull out entirely. Yes, entire regions are now effectively controlled by cartels. Not just criminal gangs, but paramilitary forces. And we're not just talking traditional warfare either. Mexican cartels have become masters of drone warfare, reaching a level of sophistication that's now being compared to battlefield tactics seen in Ukraine. What you're about to see isn't footage from the Donbass or from a Russian strike in Kursk. This is a cartel drone attack, carried out by the Tamaulipas cartel, against a convoy of rival vehicles inside Mexican territory.
Look at them, I killed them! Look! Blew it up! Oh man, they died at the, all of them!
What are you doing? Didn't you record
I
it?
recorded it! Look!
No, I didn't believe you. All of them
All
from the
those from the
died.
I know what some of you are probably thinking. No, this isn't Call of Duty gameplay, but it sure looks like it. And keep in mind the footage we just saw, that wasn't even from one of Mexico's major cartels like Sinaloa. That was a smaller group. So just imagine the kind of arsenal the big players are working with. Now, you might be wondering, where does all the money come from to fund this firepower? Well, I think you already know the answer. Drugs. Narco-trafficking remains their #1 source of income. Here's a stat that might blow your mind. Over 90% of the illegal drugs entering the U.S. come from Mexico. But here's the twist. Mexican cartels don't always produce the drugs themselves. Most of the time, they're the middlemen, the distributors. They move cocaine from Colombia, heroin from Afghanistan, and funnel it northward straight into the US, the most profitable market on earth for any product, legal or not. And yes, this includes synthetic drugs like methamphetamine and fentanyl. At this point, some of you might be asking, wait, why would anyone sell fentanyl? Isn't that stuff insanely deadly? Doesn't it kill off your customer base? Fair question. After all, if you're in this for the money, it doesn't make sense to wipe out your own demand, right? Well, let's take a look at the numbers behind fentanyl, because once you see them, everything will start to make sense. Every kilogram of pure fentanyl equals about 1 million doses. That translates to profits of $10 to $20 million per kilo for traffickers. And how much fentanyl is actually making it into the US? Well, as you can imagine, we don't really know. What we do know is this. In 2024 alone, U.S. authorities seized nearly 10 tons of fentanyl coming from Mexico, and that's just what was caught. But Mexico's role in the drug trade doesn't stop at opioids. It practically supplies the entire U.S. demand for illegal drugs. And trust me, that demand is massive. Back in 2020, Mexico's Financial Intelligence Unit estimated that cartels generate anywhere from $20 billion to $40 billion per year. Yes, that's a wide range. But let's not forget, we're talking about criminal organizations here. They're not exactly filing quarterly reports. Even at the low end of that estimate, these cartels are operating with a budget that blows past Mexico's entire 2025 military budget of $7.5 billion. And you might say, well, surely Mexico has increased its defense spending given the situation, right? Nope. In fact, under the new president, Claudia Sheinbaum, military spending has been reduced because apparently there's no need to increase it. But here's the kicker. Cartel operations go far beyond drugs. They also run a massive human trafficking industry. Migrants trying to cross from Mexico into the U.S. are charged $5,000 to $7,000 by these groups. And if you're coming from a territory directly controlled by the cartels, you might get a discount, between $500 and $2,000. Now do the math. With roughly 800,000 people attempting to cross into the U.S. each year, that's a gold mine. The United Nations estimates that human trafficking alone, just that one business line, is worth $7 billion a year to Mexican cartels. And I know what some of you might be thinking. Well, now that Donald Trump is back and talking about deporting half the country, surely that'll shut down the cartel's human smuggling business, right? Maybe, but honestly, the cartels don't care. That's just one of their revenue streams. If it dries up, they've got plenty more. Take extortion, for example. In many parts of Mexico, cartels demand protection money from local businesses. If you don't pay, things get ugly. But it goes even deeper. Cartels now run legitimate businesses too. And when you factor in money laundering and these legal fronts, it's very likely that millions of Mexicans are working for cartel-linked companies without even knowing it. Their influence is so massive that they've even inspired an entire music genre, the narco corrido, folk ballads that glorify cartel figures. Think about it like this. They control nearly 30% of Mexican territory. They run a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, and in many regions they are the law, or better said, the same law people have always known, just in a different uniform. Why? Because many cartel leaders are former soldiers and police officers who realize that organized crime pays way better than public service. Take Los Zetas, for instance, once Mexico's most brutal and powerful cartel. They got their name from the radio frequency used by GAFE, Mexico's elite special forces unit. Their founder, Arturo Guzman de Sena, was actually one of GAFE's first members. These aren't just criminals, they're elite-trained operatives who turned their skills against the very institutions they once served. And it gets darker. Today, it's not just the cartels infiltrating the police, it's the cartels recruiting police, planting agents within the system. It's a full-on inversion of power, but it doesn't stop at law enforcement. Cartels have bought off much of the political hierarchy. In Mexico, it's become routine for high-ranking officials to suddenly shut down operations just when a major arrest is about to happen. So the question now is, what is Claudia Sheinbaum's new government doing to fight cartel influence? Let's talk about that. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, better known as AMLO, will go down in history as the architect of the so-called Fourth Transformation, his grand political legacy. And just like a proud father, he's left his political project in the hands of Claudia Sheinbaum, then pulled a classic disappearing act, like a dad who said he was going out for milk and never came back. Let's be clear, he didn't exactly leave her an easy job. That's right. Before leaving office, AMLO pushed through a major reform of Mexico's judicial system. And what does this reform actually look like? How is it supposed to help in the fight against the cartels? Well, great question. Because get this, the former president's plan is to have judges elected by popular vote. Yes, you heard that right. And to make things even weirder, while the government prepares for those future elections, they've decided to assign judicial positions by lottery. Literal random draws to decide who becomes a judge. Not surprisingly, this sparked a wave of nationwide protests. Now, some of you might be thinking, wait, what's wrong with popular elections? Isn't that more democratic? Sure. On paper, it sounds great. Letting the people choose their judges could feel like a step toward accountability. But now think about it this way. If cartels control large portions of Mexico, who do you think is really going to decide which judges get elected? Exactly. For many Mexicans, this reform isn't democratic at all. It's just another step toward turning the country into a full-blown narco state. Let's look at the broader picture. Under AMLO's presidency, Mexico ranked 140 out of 180 countries on Transparency International's corruption index. That means only 40 countries are more corrupt. But that's not even the worst of it. In 2024, Mexico's homicide rate was 18.3 per 100,000 residents. And yet, as AMLO left office, he proudly claimed his administration had reduced violence. The data, however, tells a different story. According to Mexico's own Ministry of Public Security, AMLO's 6-year term, yes, Mexican presidents serve a single 6-year term, was one of the bloodiest in the country's modern history. Let me give you the exact number. 199,619 people were murdered during those 6 years. To put that into perspective, that's nearly the same number of deaths caused by Mexico's 19th century reform war, a civil war. And actually, it's more Mexican deaths than the Ukrainian casualties in the ongoing war with Russia. And here's the thing, Mexico isn't officially at war. There's no foreign invasion, no declared civil war. These deaths are the result of cartel violence, of turf wars, of lawlessness. And that's the context in which we arrive at the latest scandal shaking the nation, the discovery of a mass extermination site in Teuchitlan. What I'm about to tell you goes far beyond anything you've seen in the Saw movies or any gore film you can imagine. The suspicions surrounding the Izaguirre Ranch, a 10,000 square meter property, date back to September 18, 2024. That day, local police received an anonymous tip claiming the ranch was being used as a training camp for drug traffickers. And you might assume they ignored it, right? Well, surprisingly, they didn't. Police actually went to the site and got into a shootout with armed guards stationed at the ranch. 10 gunmen were captured. Then, authorities entered with excavators and search dogs to inspect the property. So, what did they find? According to local prosecutor Salvador Gonzalez, nothing suspicious. Apparently, they didn't raise an eyebrow at the statements from rescued individuals who conveniently explained what the ranch was used for. They weren't alarmed by the piles of abandoned clothing, or the hundreds of bullet casings, or even the human remains scattered throughout the area. It's almost like they thought they'd stumbled into a second-hand clothing market, not a crime scene. So, if the official story said nothing was there, why was the case reopened? Because of the Madres Buscadoras, specifically a grassroots organization called Guerreros Buscadores de Jalisco. In Mexico, it's considered almost a mercy when narcos leave their victims' bodies in public, because not knowing what happened to your loved ones can destroy entire families. This group is just one of many trying to track down the 125,000 people reported missing in Mexico, and since October 2024, when Claudia Sheinbaum took office, 4,000 more disappearances have been reported. These women, driven by pain and courage, aren't afraid of cartels or corrupt cops. They went straight into the ranch, cameras in hand, documenting everything they saw. What they found was a literal dumping ground, full of burned bone fragments and discarded clothes. And inside the property, they uncovered 3 underground ovens, used to cremate victims' bodies. Some family members even began to recognize the belongings of their missing loved ones. Heartbreaking letters were found, goodbye notes written by victims who knew what was coming. But in the days that followed, even more horrifying details came to light. The Izaguirre Ranch was used not only to eliminate cartel enemies, but also to train new hitmen, and their training method was beyond anything imaginable. Kidnapped victims were used as human livestock. Cartel recruits were taught how to kill and torture by practicing on real people. Many were given a choice: become the executioner or become the victim. Based on the remains found, it's estimated that at least 1,500 people were taken to this ranch. Most were killed. A few were turned into killers. Some were lured under the false promise of jobs, only to be forced to choose which part of this death industry they wanted to serve, as employees or as raw material. And to truly understand the scale of this horror, each year an estimated 30,000 to 35,000 minors are forcibly recruited by Mexican cartels. With those numbers, it becomes easier to understand how a place like the Teuchitlan extermination camp could exist, and harder to believe it's the only one. Once the truth about Isaguirre broke, the story spread like wildfire, and the situation quickly spiraled out of control for the government, which, despite its best efforts, could no longer hide what had happened. After the discovery, security forces quickly moved in to clean up the site. And the government? They started claiming it was all fake, just a setup. Nothing happened there, they said. To complete the performance, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel publicly denied any involvement in the Tenochtitlan massacre, or even any connection to the Isaguirre ranch. And now, as you can imagine, President Claudia Sheinbaum's administration is in full-blown crisis mode. They know they have to respond. But the problem is, the Mexican police force appears far more loyal to the cartels than to the people they're supposed to protect. So what has the government done so far? They've doubled down on denial. The government is afraid. They fear that confronting the cartels head-on could destabilize the entire country. But here's the twist. If Claudia Sheinbaum refuses to take on the cartels, others might, and they'll do it their own way. Which leads us to a question that could shape Mexico's future. What will weigh heavier on Sheinbaum's presidency? The threat of a military intervention by Donald Trump, or the threats from within, from the cartels themselves? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you found this video informative, don't forget to like, subscribe, and support the channel. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.